Let's begin with color correction. This is an image that was taken in fluorescent light. As a result, it's kind of green. Also, the slide itself is over 20 years old, and so it has lost some of its color. We find that this is a common condition when we're working with slides or when we're working with photographs that have some age to them. Luckily, Photoshop contains some tools that can help us to correct these images and bring them back to their original vibrance. There are many ways that we can adjust color inside of Photoshop, and of course, Photoshop includes some automatic methods. Under the Image menu, you'll see 3 adjustments: Auto Tone, Auto Contrast, and Auto Color. Let's begin with Auto Color. When we choose Auto Color, Photoshop looks at the entire image and tries to determine what is black and what is white. Photoshop's done a pretty good job. Now I've got a white shirt, and the sousaphone, although it's not entirely clean, it has turned more white than green. Originally it was kind of a yellowy color to begin with, but you can see much whiter sousaphones in the background for the other 2 players. Let's undo this correction and see what happens when we use the other 2 automated methods. Choose Edit, Undo, and boy, you sure can see the difference now. We can always change it again if we use an adjustment layer. If I go and make an adjustment with, say, Auto Tone or Auto Color, the result is a permanent change to the image. You can see that there are many choices here. I have brightness contrast, I have a levels control, I have curves, I can also adjust my exposure, and you'll see other things like vibrance or hue and saturation, as well as color balance. Let's start with color balance, because I think that if we can just get the green out, this image might look all right. When you click that color balance button, a few things have happened under the hood in Photoshop. Let's make our adjustments, and then we'll go and see what's happened inside the Layers panel. We want to make our image less green, and so to do so, we need to grab this slider between green and magenta and slide it towards magenta. If you make a big change, you can see it gets quite red. Perhaps that's too far. That's not too bad. Perhaps I need to take some yellow out as well. You'll notice that I'm adjusting the midtones. Now, we need to understand a little bit about images. Photoshop thinks in terms of shadows, which are the dark areas, midtones, which are, well, the middle tones, and then highlights, which are the bright areas of the image. You can adjust each of these independently with most of the adjustment layers in Photoshop. Now that we've made a change, let's go back to our Adjustment Layers panel by clicking this arrow here. You can add additional adjustments at any time by simply clicking one of these buttons. These are a great way to experiment, and let me show you why. Let's take a look at the Layers panel. To open the Layers panel, simply click the word Layers down at the bottom of the screen. That will open up the Layers panel, and you can see that I have my image here, which is called Background, and then on top of it I have an adjustment layer called Color Balance 1. Let's look at the image without this adjustment. To do so, simply disable the layer by clicking the eyeball here on the left. That's the original, and this is with my adjustment layer. I can make additional adjustments by double-clicking on the layer. You'll see that it opens the color balance panel, and I can continue to adjust. Let's add a little red. That's too much. It doesn't really matter, because I can always simply shut it off or delete it at any time in the future. We'll return to the adjustment list, and let's pick an exposure adjustment. This time we'll pick the levels adjustment. The levels panel shows me a histogram or a bar chart of all of the colors that are used in the picture. I can show the individual channels. This image happens to be an RGB image, so I've got red, green, and blue. Let's look just at the red channel. This is the distribution of color in the red channel. Here's the distribution of color in the green channel and in the blue channel. You can see that there are some gaps, and these gaps have been created by our adjustment layer that we put on earlier. Let's go back to RGB, and then click Auto to make an automatic adjustment. Aha! This looks a lot better. You can continue to refine by grabbing any one of these sliders and moving them around. To make the middle tones brighter, simply click in the midtones and drag it to the left. Now you can see the midtones are getting brighter. We can see more of the image. Let's return to our adjustment list. And now let's take a look at the Layers panel to see how it looks. Now you can see that there's a Levels adjustment and a Color Balance adjustment. We can turn these on and off at will. Let's turn off the Color Balance and then turn it back on. So now we've seen how we can take an image and we can adjust its color. The last thing I'd like to do here is to sharpen the image. Many times we'll use a photograph that is either blurry or isn't quite as sharp as we'd like it to be. This image is one of those. Let's see how we can use some of Photoshop's sophisticated sharpening techniques to improve the image. Under Filter, choose Sharpen, and then Smart Sharpen. Slide this to the right. Can you see the change? Let's move it back to the left to compare. See how it's blurry? Now it's sharper. I can also adjust the width of the sharpening effect. Right now it's only 1 pixel. I can make it wider, but remember that the wider you make it, the more obvious that effect is going to be. Just to experiment, slide it way over. Yikes! Let's slide it back to 1 pixel. Whew, that looks a lot better. Alright, this looks great. So now we've sharpened our image a little bit, and we've applied some color adjustments. The last thing to do is simply to save it, and we do that under the File menu. If you're working with your own images from a scanner, or perhaps from your own digital camera, they're very likely to be JPEG images, and not Photoshop images. The JPEG file format does actually remove detail in your file every time you save it. It's a good practice to convert these images to Photoshop files if you're going to be making adjustments. Because we have a Photoshop file already, I'll simply choose Save. Remember though, if you're going to use JPEGs that are coming from your camera, be sure to save as a Photoshop file. That way your pictures will maintain the highest quality that they can. You may be presented with this dialog. You can choose to shut it off so it won't appear again, or just say OK. It's a good idea to maximize compatibility, and this way your files can be opened in earlier versions of Photoshop without any difficulty.